But we're here to talk about contamination. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my layers button again. I'm going to scroll over to the right, and I'm going to click this contamination button. What that's going to do is it's going to populate all of those different types of uh, possible contamination entry pathways, and you're going to see those load on the map very quickly. So as I can see, there's some of those toxic signs. Those are toxic spills. These little tank icons, those are underground storage tanks. And I'm going to zoom out just for a little, just so you can get a perspective of how many of these potential sites exist in the United States. Some of you might be looking at this and saying, well, I live clear outside of a metro area. I don't have anything to worry about that. That's not necessarily true. We are just south of Dallas here in not a very rural area. And you can see there are contamination sites all over the place. We're going to go to, so if I zoom out even further, again, a lot of people just subscribe to LandApp just to see what's there. What's there, looking at either purchasing real estate, selling real estate, what are the potentials. But we're going to go ahead and zoom in here, and we'll take a look. You see that some of these tanks are aligned in kind of a linear pattern that are following a highway or an interstate. The reason why these are usually abandoned storage tanks for gasoline and diesel for abandoned gas stations. So what happens when LandGate pulls this data in and we look at a piece of property, it's going to look how close are we in the vicinity of any of these areas. What also just happened as I was zooming in, we talk about things that are underneath our feet that we're not really aware of unless we're told about them. You're seeing these long green lines. Those are oil and gas wells. Those are horizontal oil and gas wells that are drilled typically a mile to a mile and a half beneath the subsurface. And then they turn and they actually go horizontal under the ground. So you can see here from this piece of property, this is where the surface location of these oil and gas wells exist. So this is your neighbors, everyone around here might be aware that there's oil and gas activity because this is where they would have seen an oil rig, hydraulic fracturing crew, workover rigs, things like that. What they don't understand, and this isn't necessarily implications that there's high chances of contamination, but it tells a bigger story about the property that they're purchasing or that they might own. The wells are going up to 2 miles away from that surface location underneath oil and gas wells. There can be implications as far as revenue from those oil and gas wells, whether you're buying the minerals, not buying the minerals. This gives you a really quick look of whether that's something you need to be aware of. But the big thing on the contamination side with oil and gas data, if I scroll over here, I think we're going just east of, or west of Fort Worth, excuse me. We're just west of Fort Worth. You start to see some of these black dots there. So let's just zoom in on this little area here and let's talk about the things that we're seeing. We're seeing those little contamination images there right in the middle of my screen. So those are toxic spills. Some of them are more intense than others, depending on the type of chemical that was released, whether or not it was cleaned up, and what type of lingering effects could be there from those chemicals, as well as the volume of the chemical that was spilled. So those yellow placards there, that's impacting the potential contamination score for those parcels nearby. What's also being affected here are those black dots just north of it. So now they're centered in the middle of my screen. Those are abandoned oil and gas wells. Okay. So Brooke talked a little bit earlier about landfills. Well, there's one that would be really good for the city of Westside. That would be a very, very good site for them to look at and say, all right, we can't really do a whole lot with this site. Can we make revenue off of it? They would probably list that for a solar farm or a data center. But what folks need to be aware of, let's say Mr. Lee M. Bass here, if you're looking to purchase this property, sell the property, just do due diligence on it. There are 3 abandoned oil and gas wells at the bottom of this property. Those those three dots there within his parcel boundary. Now, does that necessarily mean that there's contamination on the property? The answer is no. No, it doesn't. This is an indication that there's potential that this is something that you would need to check. If you're buying this property from Mr. Bass, this is something that you would want to go and drive your four-wheeler, your side-by-side over there and go take a look. Because there's a really strong chance that Mr. Bass is unaware that there's abandoned oil and gas wells on his property as well. Some of you might be thinking, well, I just own a single family or a single family residence, half acre, quarter acre, whatever it is. This doesn't affect me because I don't own a ton of land. Let me show you something that's very, very interesting. I'm going to zoom out here. We're going to go to Los Angeles, California. Very, very expensive real estate, and great weather. Everybody wants to be there. I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to let this load. Remember what I just told you about what these dots actually are. These are abandoned oil and gas wells. The number of transactions that have happened on these very, very nice near beach properties, the number of transactions that have happened of people knowing what they're purchasing or what they're selling, or if they're an insurance company, what they're underwriting, or a bank, what are they loaning on? The number of transactions that are aware of the potential contamination underneath their properties is infinitesimally small. The reason why is because most of the time the data was not available. It's out of sight and out of mind. That is what the power of LandGate is. Again, for $6 a month, I just went from West Fort Worth, Texas, over to Los Angeles, California. And this is why this tool is becoming so powerful with a lot of real estate professionals, whether they're an investor, real estate agent, brokers, you name it. There is no better due diligence tool than what you're seeing here. Because if I'm looking at any of these properties, I can just click on that piece of property, and for that specific parcel, I get a full due diligence report of the land value, the solar value. And again, what's interesting, when I click on that type of data that I want to retrieve, and I go ahead and click on any of the types of information that's there, you're going to see that data populate on the map. So whatever I'm looking at within my details screen here, click the back button, whichever type of information I'm wanting to do research about, I actually get the data fed to me on the map where I can actually see that information.